All right, we're going to go ahead. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen with you guys. Um, I think we have about 45 minutes to do the lecture and the question and answer portion. So I'm going to share my screen with you, and then you should be able to chat. Do y'all see the chat option at the bottom of your screen? Okay, so in any time during the presentation, y'all can chat, and then I'm gonna open it up for questions and answers. We'll do a brief summary of chapter 1 and 2, and then I pulled up a case study that was done by Ed Trust, who put on a presentation this past week, or last, I think it was Monday, and they invited a guest speaker to come down. And I have a case study from them. I want to introduce some things from the case study. I have posted the link to the case study to your Moodle account so you can read it in depth. But it's just some interesting facts I want to pull out that may be pertaining to situations you may be encountering as you're teaching K-12. So let me share my screen with you guys. And we'll can y'all see my screen? Okay, good. All right. All right, so this is from your books, Multicultural Education Perspectives and Issues. So running through chapter 1 and chapter 2. So chapter 1, some things I pulled out was the historical aspects of multicultural education. If you read through your book, you'll see that multicultural education grew out of the civil rights movements in the late 60s, when, of course, African Americans were fighting for equal rights as the majority, which at the time were Caucasians, and they were fighting for the right to bear arms, the right to equal housing, the right to for their children to go to school. And so out of that came multicultural education. So there's some of the historical background of why we even have a multicultural education piece. Excuse me to move my stuff out the way. So those who are fighting for the civil rights demanded that schools and other educational institutions reform curricula to reflect minorities' experience. The education system, was developed by Caucasians, and the lesson and curriculum that was formed to teach students, it did not offer Black history. It did not offer any other multicultural aspects. It was simply just streamlined based on white males' perspectives of what students should learn in K-12. So there was a demand for schools to hire more Black and brown teachers, because we have an issue with students not being able to relate to their instructors, and that causes other dissensions in the classroom. Not only were they fighting for more Black and brown teachers, they were actually fighting for more Black and brown administrators, so that the children would have a more successful role model, will have access to more successful role models as they matriculated through K-12. This kind of intensified during the women's rights movement in the late 60s, early 70s. The only thing about the women's rights movement that may have interrupted the civil rights moment is, I don't know if y'all familiar with this. They have I think they have some TED Talks on it, but a lot of people bring up the issue that when African Americans have a movement, that mainstream white women attach themselves to our movement, and the cause is lost. So while African Americans were fighting for civil rights, African American women needed to start their own movement to benefit things that they were asking for that was different from the Black community as a whole. And white women attached themselves to this Black African American women's rights and changed it into just women's rights. And so they were afforded some rights for white women that Black women don't even have access to. I forgot the word they use. I wish I knew it. When I catch the word, I'm gonna send it to you. But it's a word they use when white women attach themselves to Black causes and take over. So like the Me Too movement, for instance. Me Too was a movement by Tarana, I think her name is Tarana Burke, it was a code for um, young African American males and females. It was code for I have been sexually abused and I need help. So they used the hashtag. She started saying "Me Too" because she was in a similar situation, and it made the ground comfortable for African Americans, young African American males and females to discuss issues that they may have had in the home or in their area regarding sexual harassment, child molestation, incest, and so forth. Um, Alyssa Milano posted on her Twitter, "Pound Me Too," referring to one of her friends having an issue with sexual harassment. And because, of course, she's famous, she has millions of followers, the Me Too movement shift from being a code for African American young children who were in need of assistance, it moved unto white women going after men in Hollywood with claims of being sexually harassed or assaulted. So I forgot what the name of that term is, but it's throughout history, white women have attached themselves to African American women's struggles and have changed the course of why we have those movements to benefit themselves. And then in the end, African Americans get left in the dust. So that's some other things we can't talk about later throughout the semester, that cultural shift, because it is an issue as well. So how was multicultural education developed? When we talk about multicultural, we always talk about courses, programs, and then we talk about practices. But what we need to understand is multicultural education is not a course like it is in collegiate levels. You take a multicultural course and it's supposed to be definitive across your whole matriculation through your program, but it's not a course. It's actually a practice. It's something you have to put into practice. It's something you have to be aware of when you're teaching these multicultural children and you're in multicultural situations. So it's not something you can learn overnight. It's not something you can pull a book and follow. It's something you have to practice every day and embed in yourself. So this comes from your textbook. It's the dimensions of multicultural education. And it just says the 5 realms that stem from multicultural education that you need to pay deep attention to. So I'll go through them. Content integration, which deals with the extent to which teachers use examples and content from a variety of cultures in their teaching. And we know a lot of the curriculums that we use, the examples they give are examples from non-multicultural backgrounds. For instance, and I forgot to post this picture to this PowerPoint, there's a picture of a kindergarten book where the students are to match their faces with the words. So the words are like sad, happy, mad, and glad. And all the children in the activity are Caucasian, or they don't look like they have any multicultural backgrounds. And so the white little boy matches with the happy, the white little girl matches with the sad, the white little girl matches with the whatever the other one is, and then they have the black little girl that matches with the word angry. Her facial expression is angry, which further puts into children's mind, and it's like it's a way to culturally shift children's opinions of African American women, because in society, African American women are always labeled as the angry black woman. And so we see that this was put into children's books, and they are seeing this at an early age. So some of these things people have to take into context when you're teaching different cultures. Looking at knowledge construction, teachers need to help students understand, investigate, and determine how the implicit cultural assumptions, frames of reference, perspectives, and biases within a discipline influence the ways in which knowledge is constructed. Everybody doesn't learn the same, depending on your culture. I have some friends who are from Ghana, and their teachers will pop them with sticks when they were in grade school if you didn't get an answer right. So you didn't want to be embarrassed in front of your peers, and you didn't want to get disciplined in front of your peers. So in their culture, those students are trained to be prepared when they come to class. In China, I'm not sure they use corporal punishment, but in some areas of China, you go to school during the day, and when you go home, you go to school again. So they're schooling their students year round, all day long. In our culture, it depends on what kind of household you was raised in. You may have parents or a parent that pushes education, and you may have one that does not. So you have when children teachers need to know how to add those different assumptions and perspectives into their lesson and into the way they're teaching so that they can reach all students. And I think I have like one or two more examples in future slides. We've talked a lot about equity and equity multicultural pedagogy and all that stuff like that. So equity pedagogy exists when teachers modify their teaching in ways that would facilitate the academic achievement of students from diverse racial, cultural, gender, and social class groups. We had discussion in class already, so I won't diverge more into that. Looking into prejudice reduction, the dimension focuses on the characteristics of students' racial attitudes and how they can be modified by teaching methods and materials. So again, we're teaching multicultural students. You may have students that come from a KKK background, depending on which area you're teaching in. And you have to teach according to those students' characteristics. So you have to watch what you say in front of those students, and you have to be cognizant of how that student interprets what you're the content that you're relaying. Empowering school culture, that's grouping and labeling practices. Sports participation, I don't know why we put so much focus on sports. Disproportionality in achievement and the interaction of staff and students across ethnic and racial lines must be examined to create a school culture that is empowering to all students. So looking at school as a social system. So now we know school in its inception was used to further divide the white wealthy from the working class and from the poor. If you were a rich white male, you went on to school. You even went on to get your PhD. If you were working class, you went to school sometime to the 8th grade. You may or may not have entered high school, but you learned a trade and you learned enough to add and mess with money. And if you were poor back in the day, they didn't care if you went to school or not. Usually you worked on the land with your parents and your siblings. So you went to school probably maybe to 5th grade, if school at all, and then you worked, or your parents couldn't afford to send you to school at all. Again, with this school as a social system is all designed to keep different classes of people. Multicultural and sensitive teaching materials are ineffective in the hands of teachers who have negative attitudes toward different racial, ethnic, and cultural backgrounds. Sometimes you have to dig within yourself. Can you teach somebody that comes from a household that doesn't have running water or doesn't have stable electricity, parents are dirt poor, and can you unbiasedly teach that child the same way you would teach somebody who comes to school with their school supplies? I know sometimes when you're in the middle of teaching, or you can identify those students who have and who do not have, and you have to train yourself not to be biased towards those students, because again, it's not the student's fault that they don't have. So sometimes we have to take an internal look in ourselves and make sure that we're not having negative attitudes toward different ethnic groups. So again, school as a social system. Remember that the school system is divided into several different layers, and nothing is governed by the teachers, nothing is governed by the students. It's a lot of outside interaction that governs what happens in the school, and it doesn't include teachers and students. So you have school policy and politics. Now we know school policy, we don't come up with the handbooks. We're not sitting at the table when we come up with the policies of how many days a week the students are going to go to school, the curriculum and all that. That's done by who's ever in office. School culture and hidden curriculums, that goes with charter schools. You have then a lot of that goes with teaching African American lit and African American history in these K-12 schools. Also, in those hidden curriculums, you'll find there was a big debate. There's a textbook going around that's in some schools up north and some schools down south that say slavery was a choice, and they try to downplay slavery as if people were working for minimum wage. So you have to watch those hidden curriculums. Common Core is another. It's just not as hidden, but Common Core, it has a hidden agenda. Learning styles of the school. So the learning styles of a K-12 school in the public system is totally different from the learning styles practiced in charter schools, parochial schools, private schools, and so forth and so on. And all that is dictated by a social system. Your learning styles at a parochial school is going to be different from a public school because your parents are actually paying for your curriculum at a private school. Looking at some other things that affect the school system. It's teaching styles and strategies. Once y'all leave, if y'all can one day take a day off and go visit each other classrooms, you'll get to see what some teachers are allowed to get away with in the classroom. And I'm not saying they're doing something wrong. I'm just saying they may be able to use an excessive technology or a flipped classroom or anything like that. So you just go and view what other schools are allowing their teachers, how they allow their teachers to practice their craft. Some of them have open door policies, some of them have closed door policies, or if you want your door open or not. Some of them do year-round observations. We have team teaching. You have some administration that are hands-on, some that are hands-off, and all that is dictated by who runs your system. Your instructional materials is going to be different. We have some of y'all that may not have instructional materials at all, and some that may have an abundance. So again, it depends on the social system of your class. I know what we may see at Baker Heights is going to be totally different from the materials that we're going to see at Dufrock. And that's because of the social systems. So I ain't going to go through all of them. Culture and society. So when teachers treat the dominant culture in the curriculum as a matter of cultural borders rather than of boundaries, the classroom can become an unsafe place for students. So let's take, for instance, asking teacher-like questions. When you have a teacher that asks a question like, what color is this? If a student is in kindergarten and have never been in a school situation, when someone asks them a question like that, if their parent is not asking them a question like that, then you have a culture bias, and you have a border and a boundary between you and the way that student is learning at home, and you have to find a way to weave through those borders and boundaries to get your content across. Giving, and I put in here giving what I call cultural routines. In my house, when I was young, I didn't have to ask permission to go to the bathroom. You get up and you went to the bathroom. In some people's homes, they are trained that you don't go in the refrigerator without asking. You don't do anything without permission. You don't go to the bathroom without asking. So if this is my first time in a school-like setting, if I have to go to the bathroom, I want to get up and go because I haven't yet been trained to ask permission from an adult to do those things. So some things your students do in the classroom is because that's their culture. When we go into K-12 in America, we sit in desks. But if you go into K-12 in countries like India, they may sit on the floor. Africa, they may sit on the desks or on floors in Africa. So sometimes when we give routines, we have to be mindful of what students we're teaching, because you need to intermix those cultures and those routines into your curriculum and your behavior management plans. Questions and answers so far. Everybody quiet? No questions? All right, we'll keep moving. Oh, I have something in the chat. Okay, Demetrius. I don't know why John Bryan said why not, but we'll keep going. So this next part, and that was just pretty much a summary of what was in chapter 1 and chapter 2. I hope you guys read it and were able to answer your discussion questions that should be posted. Next, I want to get into, move my stuff out the way. Next, I want to get into this inequities in advanced coursework case study. And because I found some interesting facts, and I found some facts about Louisiana that you may be privy to. And so I want to get into some of that. And then we'll open it up for questions and answers, and then go ahead and log out because we are on a time limit. All right, so I have this inequities in advanced coursework case study book. So this is what's driving them and what leaders can do. This was printed and distributed by the Education Trust, and I put the link on Moodle. So if you want to read more in depth, you can, because I'm just going to give y'all the logistics so we can discuss if need be. So in this report, the Education Trust examines the many ways Black and Latino students are locked out of AP coursework, which can set them up for success in college and careers. So during this case study, they found that Black and Latinos do well in AP classes when they're actually enrolled in those classes. They also found that Blacks and Latinos are not represented in AP classes. So it's a small amount of students that are in these AP classes. And then they found that schools that serve mostly Black and Latinos do not enroll the students in AP. And schools that serve fewer Black and Latinos deny access to students, deny access to AP class to those students. And Louisiana is actually in that number. So how well are we doing? This study was over the whole 50 U.S. states, and it took account of several K-12 schools, so middle, elementary, and high school students. Of the 20% of Black students that are enrolled in AP classes, 19% were passing. And for Latinos, 27% were enrolled and 26% were passing. So it's not an issue of can we do the work. It's just that we're not given access or given an opportunity to do that work. Looking at elementary enrollment, let me pull up my notes. So in elementary enrollment, let me see what it says because it has some figures that I wanted to give y'all. I don't see the numbers in here no more, and I thought I highlighted it. All right, let me skip. So overall enrollment in elementary schools. So 16% of all African American students enrolled in the school. Only 9% were enrolled in gifted and talented programs. And for Latinos, 28% of all Latino students are enrolled in elementary school, but only 18 were enrolled in gifted and talented programs. Not because they were not, they didn't have the scholastic aptitude, but because they were not afforded the opportunity to enroll. For 8th grade enrollment in AP classes or for Algebra 1 classes, 15% of African American students were enrolled in 8th grade. Only 10% of all African American students were enrolled in Algebra 1. And Algebra 1 is one of those indicators that determine LEAP scores, standardized testing scores, and success in AP classes in 9th to 12th grade. For Latino students, an overall enrollment in 8th grade was 25%, and of those, 18% were enrolled in Algebra 1. For high school, 15% Black students, only 9% were enrolled in at least one AP course. And for Latinos, a little bit higher, 24% of all Latino students in high school, only 21% were enrolled in at least one AP course. The only thing I did not care about this study is it did not give me the comparison between Black and Latinos and then whites. So it just gave me the numbers for Black and Latinos. So it's not, I can't compare how many of those students that are white students have access and are enrolled in at least one AP class. So let's look at Louisiana representation. And I know it's kind of small, but of Louisiana, there are 58 Black students enrolled in gifted and for every 58 Black students enrolled in gifted and talented programs, there's only 58 for every 100 who need to be enrolled in. I don't know if y'all getting this pop up. Okay, so let me repeat because I got a pop up. I don't know if y'all seen it, but I had a pop up. So there are 58 students enrolled in gifted and talented program for every 100 Black students who will need to be enrolled. So out of those 100 students who need access and are gifted and talented, we're only enrolling 58 of those students in Louisiana. It talks about accessibility. So for the courses offered, do Black students attend schools that offer gifted and talented programs? I know some of our programs are disappearing. In Louisiana, there are about 90 Black students attending schools with gifted and talented program for every 100 students that need to be enrolled. So we're still losing 10 students that should be in AP classes who are not given the opportunity. Total seat representation. So that's, do Black students attend schools that have a fair number of students enrolled in the program? In Louisiana, schools serving the most Black students have 80 students enrolled in their gifted and talented program for every 100 students that should be. So you're missing 20 students for every 80 students that are enrolled. You're missing 20 that can have opportunity for those AP courses. And the share of seats. So are Black students given a fair opportunity to enroll in the program when their school offers it? For Louisiana, for every 100 students that are able to enroll in these gifted and talented programs, only 65 are being selected. So you got 35 students who are leaving out for every 100 students. Student mark. And attendance representation. So do students overall attend schools that offer gifted and talented programs? 83% of elementary school students attend schools that offer gifted and talented programs in the state of Louisiana. But of that number, it did not say how many students are being selected to participate in those gifted and talented programs. And we know that once those students are selected in elementary, they get a seat in the middle schools and they get a seat already in high school. So if only 83% of the students are attending schools that offer it, less than that are being allowed to enter those programs. So this research asks the question, why is this happening? Which we know why it's happening. It's not rocket scientists, but I'm going to share the data that they found of why this is happening. So 6 reasons why they say we have these inequities in African American and Latino students having access to AP classes. Is resource inequities, which we know. It is educator bias, which we know is across the board, and sometimes it comes from African American teachers as well. It's just not Caucasian. Assessment and grading bias, lack of diverse educators, which is a big issue, inequitable access to early childhood education, and lack of communication with family and advancement opportunities. And so let me run through what they say about each one of those. So resource inequities, as documented in the Funding Gaps report written by also EdTrust, school districts that serve large populations of students of color receive far less funding than those serving white and more affluent students. Too often, those funding gaps are exacerbated by unfair spending practices within the district. And we do know that Louisiana has given our principals autonomy now with their budget, so they can spend their budget how they want to. So these funding inequities have a profound effect on the educational opportunities districts and schools are able to provide, including AP courses. When we talk about educator bias, one of the biggest barriers for Black and Latino students is an over-reliance on the recommendations of teachers and counselors, whose judgments may be shaped by implicit or even explicit racial bias. Assessment and grading, y'all know how I feel about letter grades. I rather performance than pen and paper multiple choice tests. Eliminating racial and cultural bias in tests, whether they're written by the publisher or the school staff, and grading practices is an ongoing challenge for schools. Testing materials can undermine diversity, reinforce stereotypical roles, and devalue racial and cultural differences. And because teachers are not immune to racial bias, those biases show up in their grading processes. Lack of access to diverse educators. About 41% of U.S. K-12 public school students are Black or Latino. Only 16% of their teachers are Black and Latino. This means that many Black and Latino students are missing out on the benefits of having a teacher of the same race and ethnicity. Studies have also shown that when African American males are taught between the grades of K through 3 by at least one African American male, that they have a greater, I think it's like a 73% chance of graduating high school. And that drastically decreases if they never see an African American male face before going into middle school. inequitable access to quality early childhood opportunities. High quality early learning opportunities are an important pathway to strong academic outcomes for Black and Latino students. In fact, differences in quality of children's early childhood experiences affect the way educators identify giftedness in young children. And y'all know we do have early childhood programs, but one of the things that I do not like about what we do here in Louisiana, especially Baton Rouge, is most of our early childhood programs are income based. And so if you have a child that comes from middle class to upper class home, they do not get to go to certain early childhood programs such as Head Start. Lack of communication with family about advanced opportunities. Sometimes school makes it difficult for families to find out about advanced coursework opportunities, and that lack of communication and meaningful engagement leads to a failure of the parent to accommodate, and also a failure of the school system to accommodate those students who are eligible for those AP classes but are just unaware of their eligibility. So these are some policy solutions set forth by Ed Trust. They said that all systems should set clear, measurable goals for advancing access to and success in advanced coursework, and commit to publicly measuring state and district progress toward those goals. And those goals should state that within an ambitious and explicit number of years, Black and Latino students will be fairly represented. States should also set intermediate targets and include goals and plans to meet them in highly visible communication. Another policy solution is to use data to identify the barriers that prevent students of color and students from low-income backgrounds from enrolling in advanced courses. To collect and publish disaggregated data annually. Use quant and qualitative data to determine if the barriers are a fair representation. Another policy is where schools serving the most Black and Latino students do not have any or enough advanced courses. States should invest to expand advanced coursework opportunities to those schools, either through more courses or seats, or by providing funding to districts or schools that primarily serve Black and Latino students, creating programs to allow fully certified teachers to serve students in other schools, creating programs to recruit or train teachers to teach advanced courses, and providing guidance and technical assistance to districts to identify opportunities to relocate those resources. Also, where Black and Latino students do not have a fair chance to take advantage or advanced coursework opportunities already offered within their school, states should require and support districts to expand eligibility and increase access to advanced courses by requiring the use of multiple measures to identify students for advanced coursework and not just standardized tests, requiring and providing funding to support schools and districts in implementing universal screening for gifted and talented programs, requiring automatic enrollment, investing in teacher and school counselor diversity, providing professional development opportunity to districts, principals, teachers, and counseling so they can learn about these traditional barriers to access and success in AP courses. Eliminating financial barriers. I know some school systems pay for their students to take AP and dual enrollment classes, and some school systems charge their students, sometimes I think it's a minimum of $75 a course. So eliminating those financial barriers and requiring that information about advanced courses be shared with students and families. And lastly, and also requiring districts to adopt a culturally relevant, rigorous, and engaging curriculum and offering short-term targeted support to students. And then lastly, states should provide sufficient support for students to prepare for advanced coursework and their success once enrolled. States should also support districts by providing resources necessary to prepare those students for advanced coursework. They should invest in high quality early childhood education opportunities, require subject matter expertise in teachers who teach advanced courses, require or incentivize districts to support teachers while they are teaching advanced courses, and require that the districts provide additional advanced coursework preparation and support to students who may need it. Any questions about the inequities in AP courses in the state of Louisiana, or any comments? Yes. Mm-hmm. So, and that's an issue. Some people can't afford to take AP courses, and that's why they don't take them. And I won't. It stopped letting me see my chat box. So if y'all put something in the chat, I may not be able to see it. Oh, I'm breaking up. I couldn't see my chat box. Any other questions or comments? All right. So since we don't have any additional questions and comments, we're going to end the chat here. I just need to make sure that y'all know that you do have an assignment on Moodle that is open, and it does have a deadline. I think we have a case study and maybe a one or two discussion questions for chapter 1 and chapter 2. I'm not finished looking at the reflection papers y'all turned in, but I have, have been taking notes, so I'll get those to you hopefully this week. And if we don't have any questions or comments, we're going to end it here. So thank y'all for tuning in, and I'll see y'all next class period.